All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be finishing our dive into the Dragoon by looking at the Valkyrie. Now, if you're wondering, well, what's a Dragoon? I don't remember that. Well, I have been covering classes from a homebrew called the 5th edition D&D Cross Final Fantasy XIV Classes and Races Compendium. Effectively, it takes all the classes in Final Fantasy XIV and it translates them into D&D 5th edition. And thus far, it's been really, really cool. The sheer just volume of additional content in this supplement, which is 100% free, by the way. You can get it if you go to the description. I actually have a link where you can go to the Reddit. They have, not only do they have the most current version, but I believe you can get to former versions or earlier versions. If there was a version that you liked better than a new update or whatever. Yeah, it's really cool. We've been covering the Dragoon. Yeah, we're going to cover the final subclass. So before we get into the subclass, a really quick reminder, or even before we go into that, please, if you're enjoying this content, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon and turn notifications on. All of these things not only help you to get all the content I'm going to make, but they improve recommendability for the video. The more likes it has, the more YouTube will recommend it to other channels. The more subscriptions that happen from this video, the more YouTube will recommend it. The more people that turn on notifications from this video, the more people YouTube will recommend it. So please do that. So, quick refresher on 5th edition class design. In 5th edition, every class is designed to play very, very differently right from the beginning. In order to do that, they have these things that we call defining features. Defining features are effectively either abilities that are unique to the class itself, or they are abilities that maybe other classes get, but this class gets it earlier, or can use it in a special way that makes it unique. In order for an ability to be considered a defining feature, it has to show up within the first 2 levels. So what are the defining features of the Dragoon? Well, the first one is Dragoon's Trance. This is basically an ability that you activate with a bonus action. It lasts for a minute, and it changes how you can move. Specifically, when it's worded correctly, I've already mentioned how it needs to change for this to do this. It allows you to jump significantly higher and significantly further than you would normally be able to do using the jump command. In addition to that, the Dragoon's Trance is necessary for quite a few of the Dragoon's other abilities, including their second defining feature, which is jump. Now, there is a jump form of movement, and then there is the jump action for the Dragoon, which is effectively a special action they can take that allows them to basically jump into the air and land on an enemy, having the enemy roll a saving throw, and the enemy takes extra damage. They take damage. It's the weapon damage die plus some extra damage. They take full damage on a failed save and half damage on a success. So jump is guaranteed damage. You will always do damage. It's just going to fluctuate how much damage you do. The final defining feature is right now called Lancet. I have suggested calling it Lancet Thrust because it introduces the idea of thrust abilities. Thrusts are basically attacks that have extra things added to them. Lancet specifically, when you attack someone, you will actually get half the damage you do from that attack back as hit points, and there's a limited number of Lancet thrusts you can do. The rest of the thrusts, there isn't a limitation on how many you can do. So the Dragoon itself doesn't actually use the attack action because it doesn't get multi-attack. So what it does is when you are battling, you actually will choose between using a jump or high jump. There are multiple versions of jump you can use. You'll fluctuate between using a jump attack or a high jump, or using one of your thrust abilities. And that's basically how you play this class as far as attacking and battle goes. Is your choice is generally going to be between your thrust attacks and your jump attacks, which makes it a very unique class as far as weapons-based classes are. Most other weapons-based classes, you have to use the attack action in order to use them. Monks have to use the attack action in order to get their free attack from unarmed strike or to do flurry of blows. They have to make melee weapon attacks to use their stunning blow. A lot of their key abilities will fluctuate on making attacks and things like that. Paladins, in order to smite, they have to make an attack first. Rangers mostly just use it to attacks, but their Hunter's Mark, which is a technically defining feature, even though it's a spell, that other classes get, their Hunter's Mark only gets damage on weapon attacks, which require the attack action. So yeah, the Dragoon is unique in the fact that it doesn't use the attack action. Sort of. Now we're going to talk about the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie itself, the idea is really cool. The idea of the Valkyrie is instead of the Dragon Slayer, which focuses a little bit more specifically on being able to kill dragons, and just giving it a little bit, a few more tools in its toolkit that it can use to do different things. Or the Dragonheart, which focuses on kind of area damage and just doing more damage. Most of Dragonheart's abilities are all about let's get more damage in. The Valkyrie is based on the idea that Dragoons themselves are a hypermobile class. That's why Jump gives you additional movement. That's why Dragoon's Trance gives you a different way to move in a very, very interesting way. Hypermobility is very, very useful in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. It's one of the reasons I play a monk. Monks are by far the most mobile class in the game. Even compared to barbarians who get the same movement speed bonuses as monks, monks can just move in more ways. They can run up walls. Depending on your subclass, they can teleport. And a lot of subclasses give them additional ways to just make sure they are where they want to be, whether that's through preventing enemies from taking opportunity attacks or being able to knock enemies prone or move them around so you can move exactly where you want. Hypermobility is really good. The Valkyrie is designed to kind of take advantage of not just the hypermobility aspect of the Dragoon, but specifically the aerial mobility, which is not something that any class has specialized in thus far in 5th edition. You don't have aerial based classes. So in theory, I like the idea of the Valkyrie. As far as in practice, well, let's look at it. At 3rd level, you get what's called Crescent Moon Strikes. When you make the attack action, if there's a creature directly beside your target, you may roll a second attack roll against that creature as a bonus action. You do not receive an ability modifier bonus on the damage roll for this attack. So Crescent Moon Strikes effectively allows you to dual wield without dual wielding, because the rules for it basically apply the same rules that you would for dual wielding. The only limitations are it has to be against a different enemy, so it does rely on enemies being close enough that you can hit both of them. And you have to use the attack action. Remember that whole spiel I just did like 2 minutes ago where Dragoons don't use the attack action? Well, Valkyrie is designed to work almost exclusively with the attack action, since their third level ability, which is generally your third level or your first subclass of ability, is going to tell you what the rest of the subclass is based around. It may not get improvements or anything, but whatever your first or second, whatever you get when you choose your subclass is going to be the main flavor for that. And this tells me the Valkyrie has to use the attack action, meaning it can't use any of the defining features of the Dragoon. Now, I've talked about this before. Anytime you have something that prevents you from using a subclass that prevents you from using the defining features of the base class, that's a bad thing. Because what happens is the base class and the subclass will fight against each other. And it will make both less useful. The best subclasses take an aspect of the base class and expand it in some way. Allow them to use it in a different way. Give them different instances where they can use it, or simply just give them different abilities they can use in tandem with their base class abilities. The Valkyrie has already started off right at third level by going, we're going to discard the base class. You are not going to use anything from the base class, aside possibly from the Dragoon's trance, as far as we can tell at level 3, because you can still use the hypermobility from the Dragoon's trance, but everything else is gone. You can't use your thrust attacks because those aren't the attack action. They are the thrust action, effectively. You can't use the jump ability or the high jump ability because it's not the attack action. The defining aspect of the Valkyrie subclass at level 3 is you have to use an action that you're not supposed to use for any other subclass or the base class itself. That's not great. If this were to change to when you make a melee weapon attack, if we just change the attack action, which I think that might have been what they were trying to go for, because the phrasing you use when talking about is you don't make the attack action. It's when you use the attack action, you don't make the attack action. Or when you make a melee weapon attack. So I'm hoping it was intended to be when you make a melee weapon attack. Because that means for jump and high jump, it is still a choice between Crescent Moon Strikes and those. But that means any thrust attack can also get Crescent Moon Strike, because part of a thrust attack is you make a melee weapon attack. So with that little change, that massively changes how the Valkyrie works, and it makes it actually work. It'll probably mean the Valkyrie will be using the hypermobility aspect of Dragoon's Trance a lot more than other classes, because they need to get into a position where they can be close enough to attack two different enemies. It also means reach weapons are going to be very, very useful. Now, there is an issue with wording here where it says if there's a creature directly beside your target. Directly beside is not a defined term in 5th edition. Generally, because there are other abilities that do this exact same thing, that allow you to do something to a target next to your target. They don't use the phrase directly beside your target because directly beside doesn't mean anything. Directly is technically a subjective term. And so is beside. My house is beside my neighbor's house. It's also beside a major city. So all of these terms are subjective, and that will turn into rules lawyering and arguments. What the phrase should be if there's a creature within 5 feet of your target, because on a battle map, that is quote unquote directly next to, and that gives you the same thing. I would actually prefer to see Crescent Moon Strikes instead of a creature directly beside your target, just because that's been done so much. And from my own experience, it's not something that happens a lot unless the rest of your team is grouping enemies for you. Most enemies don't sit right next to another enemy, simply because it makes them that much a better target for area attacks. And even stupid enemies can figure out, if I stand next to my buddy, I'm going to get hurt more. So what I would prefer to see this is, instead of if there's a creature directly beside your target, I'd like to see that changed to if there is another creature in your melee reach, or in your melee attack range, because that will mean reach weapons, which spears are not reach weapons, but pikes are, along with basically all the other things like lances are reach weapons, and that would give the Valkyrie an actual benefits to using a reach weapon versus like a great axe or a great sword, which does more damage. They use D12s or 2D6s. To great sword uses 2D6. Great axe uses a D12. So if you were to mention that anything within a attack range, that would mean Crescent Moon Strikes could now be used if you're using a reach weapon like a pike or a glaive or a lance or something along those lines. You could now attack targets that have specifically spaced themselves so as not to be viable targets for most, especially at the third level, for most quote-unquote range spells. Your range or your area spells at third level are generally going to be cone-based, 15-foot cones. So if your enemies stick about 20 feet up apart, they can't be multi-targeted by that. But they would be able to with Crescent Moon Strikes if the Valkyrie dropped right in between them, which would also give them a huge benefit for using the Dragoon jump, because they could jump over enemies into the exact spot they needed to be. So yeah, right now Crescent Moon Strike, really, really bad. Make 2 minor changes and it turns into a really interesting ability that really emphasizes that idea of Valkyries benefiting from the hyper mobility of the class. At 7th level, you get Flight of the Dragon. Thank you for the phone. I hate doing this, but it might be important. Okay, we'll deal with that in just a second. All right, so 7th level, Flight of the Dragon. You are able to expend 2 uses of Dragoon's Trance to gain 60 feet of flying speed for the duration of the trance. When you do so and you throw a pair of dragon's wing sprouts from your back, you may use jump and high jump features while in flight, using your place in the air as your starting position. So, this one, again, is worded a little bit weird because I can't tell. I think I know what they intended, but from the wording, it doesn't work the way I think they intended it. What it sounds like here is you're able to expend 2 uses of Dragoon's Trance to gain 60 feet of flying speed for the duration of the trance. What it sounds like is you activate your Dragoon's Trance, and then you can expend 2 uses of Dragoon's Trance to gain 60 feet of flying speed. Meaning to get the flying speed, you have to use 3 Dragoon's Trance, which at level 7 is all of your Dragoon's Trances. This would be a 1 day thing. What I think it's supposed to be is 1 Dragoon Trance, you just go into Dragoon Trance. 2, you get a flying speed on top of your Dragoon Trance. And in order for that to work that way, what you need to say is, when you enter your Dragoon's Trance, you can expend an additional use of Dragoon's Trance to gain 60 feet of flying speed, which shouldn't be 60 feet of flying speed. It should be a flying speed of 60 feet. It's just how it's normally phrased, for the duration of the trance. That makes this significantly more useful. Flying in 5th edition is not something that's used in combat a ton. And it's generally never used by melee classes. Generally, anyone that's going to be flying is going to have ranged attacks because they can get far enough away that melee people can't hurt them, but that they can kind of rain down destruction on them. So having a melee character with flying is a little bit weird, but if you combine it with the Crescent Moon strikes, this would effectively mean you're not really using the Dragoon jump aspect of Dragoon's trance. You are literally flying to the exact spot you want to be able to make your Crescent Moon strikes using your thrust. It does mention that you can use jump and high jump from wherever you are. The other thing that's beneficial about this is we've talked before about crash landing, where theoretically, if you jump on against a creature that's in the air, well, after the jump command is done, you're going to plummet to the ground. The Flight of the Dragon is going to effectively make it so that you can jump against creatures in the air and not have to worry about falling because you have a flight speed, so you can stay in the air. I would mention for Flight of the Dragon, because we've already talked about the idea of hover, there should be some mention of hover in there. Otherwise, between turns, you have to return to the ground, which I don't believe is what this is supposed to imply. So mentioning, you gave a flight speed of 60 feet with the ability to hover. And that turns this into a really interesting thing. This, again, gives you a choice between making jumps and making your thrusts. Because thrusts, you can attack multiple enemies. But if there is only one enemy, your jump attacks might be a better use. Again, depending on the situation. Chaos thrust, it's always nice to get extra damage. Heavy thrust, it's nice to do extra damage. But jump is guaranteed damage. Or high jump is not guaranteed, but it's a lot of damage. So, yeah, changing the wording to clarify whether it takes 2 or 3 uses of Dragoon's Trance is important. Flying speed at 7th level can be a little bit quote-unquote overpowered, but because that is the focus of the Valkyrie and it doesn't get anything else, it's really useful, especially since Flight of the Dragon can be used outside of combat. Which most of these 7th level subclass abilities have an out of combat use for them. So, yeah. Overall, it's interesting. I like it, but it's still a weird thing for a melee class to get a flight speed because a lot of times they're not going to be able to use it to its full benefit. So, yeah. At 11th level, you get Valkyrie Strike. Hitting at 11th level, you don't provoke opportunity attacks when you fly out of enemies' reach. That is a really big deal. As much as it is literally a one-sentence ability, that does change a lot of things. Because of Flight of the Dragon, you can get a 60-foot flying speed. 60-foot speed is the maximum speed that monks and barbarians get unless their race has, wood elves get an extra 5 feet to their speed. So Flight of the Dragon gives you the speed of like a 17th level monk instantly. Now, it's very limited compared to the monk that's always got it. But combining that with anytime you fly, you also don't provoke opportunity attacks. You have become the hypermobile master. Even with something like the mobility feat, which means anytime you make an attack against someone, you don't don't provoke opportunity attacks. This, you just don't provoke opportunity attacks. And with a 60-foot movement speed, you can fly in, do your Crescent Moon strikes, and then fly out, which for a melee class is really useful. This actually gives them a way to use their flight speed to stay out of range of damage without having to worry about not being able to use their attacks, or anytime they go in, they have to stay there until they kill the enemy and they can fly out again. It also makes repositioning really, really simple. If the enemy you're attacking is just not near anyone, but there's 2 enemies right next to each other that would be perfect. You fly away, go over to the other ones there. That means no matter where the enemies move to, as long as there is two effectively within 20 feet of each other, your Valkyrie can find a place to get some benefit, which is good. And it definitely makes this a very interesting flying-based class. Finally, at 15th level, you get Stardiver. While under the effects of Flight of the Dragon, as an action, you use your high jump feature, but may complete the attack in the same turn you start your dive. If you do so, you expend one use of Dragoon Trance. So, the interesting thing about high jump is the fact that it gets you away from all of your enemies for a turn, and then you don't come back until the start of your next turn. This allows you to avoid that if you want to get the damage in early to make sure they can't run away or something, which is nice, but you're going to burn a use of Dragoon's Trance to do it. You've already had to burn extra uses of Dragoon's Trance just to get the flight aspect. And you already can fly. So the only real benefit of high jump is the additional damage and maybe crash landing if you're against a flying enemy, because that happens on high jump. So with that being said, for a 15 level ability, especially when you compare it to like Life of the Dragon for the Dragon Heart, where they can use Dragon Breath effectively twice as it's written. Or you look at Dragon's Bane, where they just get additional damage to attacks. Stardiver is really, really underwhelming. I would much rather see Stardiver, instead of allowing you to burn a Dragoon's Trance, which is already extremely limited. You only get 6 at max level. Instead of allowing you to burn a Dragoon's Trance to do damage a little bit early, I would prefer to see Stardiver allow you to use Crescent Moon Strikes from jumps. I think if you make that change, that would really balance the class and turn it into something fun to play. Now, you have the full choice that every other Dragoon Dragoon subclass has of, do I want to make a jump or do I want to make a thrust? Because now there's no downside to making a jump where you don't get your Crescent Moon Strikes. Now you can always get your Crescent Moon Strikes and do the additional damage from high jump or the guaranteed damage from regular jump. If you want to get the crash landing aspect from high jump, you could get that. Otherwise, thrusts are still useful enough that it's never going to be a thing where high jump just always does more damage. Yeah, but there's a chance that they can save out of it. And with things like legendary creatures that get to just save from damage, you don't want to do that. The other thing that's nice about the thrust attacks is they can crit where other ones can't. So if you can get something on your weapon, like a flame tongue weapon or an ice brand weapon, or you can get like elemental weapon cast on there, or I'm trying to think. I think there's another spell called Holy Weapon. I'm not 100% certain, but anything that adds extra to the damage for every attack, or if you're able to like if you multi-class into a hunter to get the hunter's mark ability, or if you take Magic Initiate and get the Hex spell. There are so many ways that having that additional attack is going to be very, very beneficial for you. And it gives you something you can use your bonus action for on a regular basis. Like, the way Stardiver is written right now, it's almost useless, and I can see it getting never used ever, which is not something you want to see with a 15th level ability. Change it to, it doesn't require Dragoon's Trance, because you already have such a limited number that it's just not fair to make them do that for something you already get. You just get it a little bit earlier is all. So get rid of the Dragoon's Trance and make it so that you can use your Crescent Moon Strikes when you use your jumps and high jumps. And this turns into a really interesting class. So, final thoughts. Overall, the class as written is kind of broken. And broken in a bad way. Not broken in an overpowered way. Broken in you're never going to choose this as a subclass. It's just not fun. You have to use the attack action to get Crescent Moon strikes, which you can't do because the class is built around never using the attack action. Flight of the Dragon is interesting, but the way it's written right now, it takes, at max level, it takes half of your Dragoon's trances. At level 7, it takes all of your Dragoon's trances to use. So it is a one-and-done ability, and that's not fun. Valkyrie Strike is really interesting when you combine it with Flight of the Dragon and Crescent Moon strikes. And then Stardiver is useless. But change Stardiver to allow your jump attacks to use Crescent Moon strikes. And this turns into a hyper-mobile, really interesting class based around finding where your enemies are grouped close enough for you to do extra damage. And I like that. But the way it's written right now, it is not a subclass I would ever recommend someone taking because it's just, it fights against itself and it fights against the base class. So, yeah. Otherwise, that is going to be all for me today. As always, like I said in the beginning, like, subscribe, turn on notifications in the comments down below. What are your guys' opinion on Flight in 5th edition in general? I've seen some people that think, like, especially like your flying wizard turrets, people hate that vehemently. Whereas other people like, it's really, really cool. And as long as there's an aspect that allows it to be countered in some way, it's a really interesting ability. Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today. And I will see you guys the next time. All right? Bye-bye.